Broker Daily Uncut.
Broker Daily Uncut.
News, views and opinion about what's shaping Australia's mortgage and finance industry.
Welcome back. Alex Whitlock, Broker Daily. Got an opportunity to have a catch-up with someone I've known for a short while, an extension of some of the conversations that I have in and around the offices. I'm joined by Sebastian Watkins, who's the COO and co-founder of Aussie and Lendy.
That's it. Yep.
I got the title right.
That's a good start.
When we catch up, I'm always keen to pick your brains about what's going on in and around the marketplace. I've kind of caught up with you more recently around some of the things that we're doing in real estate, funnily enough. So I thought rather than, try and remember the conversations, why not get you on a podcast, share it with everyone else to tune in. Again, I've been catching up with you quite recently around your move into real estate and looking at, what I say your move into real estate, your extension of services to real estate agents. And I thought maybe a good place to kick off is, look, everyone's familiar with Aussie and Lendy, so there's no point sort of unpacking that and looking at sort of what that is. So what fascinates me is this move to look at providing services and support for real estate. And whilst it's a good opportunity in theory, actually manifesting that into something tangible is quite a sort of a complex thing. Where did you start? Where did this originate from?
Great question. First of all, thanks for having me on. Look, I think Dave and I have long held the view that buying and owning a property in Australia is complicated. I mean, it's not impossible, and obviously hundreds of thousands of people do it every year, but if we kind of strip it back to what we would call the must-have components of buying a property, you're traversing 4 or 5 different experiences and relationships and brands at a minimum. So if you think about what do you need to do to buy a property, you need to find the property. So you're going to need a portal and maybe a buyer's agent. You're going to need to finance it, most likely. Congratulations if you don't, but most do. So that's a bank or a broker. You're going to need a conveyancer to help you on that property. You're going to need to engage with a real estate agent. And, then you'll need building insurance. But if we look at those first 4, there's a portal that you've got to have a relationship with. There's a broker or a bank you've got to have a relationship with. You've then got to have a conveyancer relationship and a real estate relationship. And that really culminates in at least 4 different experiences, brands, conversations. Some might phone call, some might email. And cobbling that all together is not impossible, but it's not the prettiest of scenarios. And so when we thought about Aussie and what we're calling our next chapter, for us, the motivation was bringing that together in one brand and one experience. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is we believe it's a better way to buy a property. Yeah. You can stay in the same experience with the same brand. You can move from your pre-approval into your search. You can tag and share properties with your broker, with your real estate agent. You've got the conveyancer in there. You've got tri-party or multi-party chats happening. You've got the contract to sale coming into the one spot. You're doing your ID once. There's a single platform across all the communication. So you're not bouncing in and out of emails and WhatsApp and messages with different people. And quite often, as we know, one person points the finger to the other person, when something goes wrong. It all sits in one experience. So that's kind of reason number 1. Number 2, I think for us as well, being a broker at the moment, we are very good at writing mortgages, and we've got the Aussie brand has 33-odd year history and heritage in that space and has been very successful. I think as we look to the future, really there's a lot of brokers in the space at the moment, and I think just being a good broker is probably not enough to future-proof our business. And so commercially, as we're looking at this space as well, we're saying, well, we need to be more than just a broker. We need to understand how we can offer customers more than just the finance. Now, the finance is a very important part of it, but good brokers often do much more than just the finance. And so effectively what we're doing is we're bringing that experience into the platform. We're creating a new way or a new reason to use Aussie. We're calling it Find, Buy and Own. So Aussie is the place where you can find, buy and own property. And in doing so, we hope to create an experience that is so jarringly different to just using the broker that if you use it once, you go, wow, that I wouldn't do it any other way. You know, I could just search for my properties. I had a buyer's agent in there, I had a conveyancer, I had my finance, it all sat in the one spot. And, you know, if we get our job right or do our job right, that becomes a beautiful experience. That becomes the new way, as opposed to, that was just a little bit different.
I'm going to ask you about AI shortly, and it's coming from somebody who knows nothing whatsoever about it, so it's going to be a bit of a one-way conversation, a couple of questions. I'll come back to that in a short while. I've worked in and around media, around mortgage broking for 25 years in Australia, but I got my first loan ever through a mortgage broker back in the late 90s when I was out in Hong Kong. So I'm very well versed with brokers and utterly committed to the broker proposition. But over the sort of the 27, 28 years that I've been aware of mortgage broking, the kind of the world's changed a lot, you know, and the broker that first helped me get finance was based in Perth. I'd bought an off-the-plan development in Melbourne. I'd left it really late to get finance, and a broker came out and saved my life, and the rest is history. But back then, you'd probably only got 4, 5, maybe 4,000 brokers across Australia. It was really a very embryonic and an emerging industry. As you quite rightly point out today, I don't know, we've got 21,000 brokers. Yeah. I sense that what was once the disruptor potentially is now open for disruption with a sort of 77% market share. Yeah. I think that it's by evolution, you know, mortgage broking is a big proposition now. So I think differentiation is critical.
Absolutely. Even when we started our business 13 years ago, market share was, 40, 50%, something like that. And really our message to the consumer was use broking. It's a choice proposition. We do the heavy lifting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we were winning customers away from the direct channel and the bank.
Yeah.
That battle's largely been fought and won, right? As you said, 7% of consumers now take their mortgage out through a broker. And so while there's still obviously and will always be a percentage of customers that go direct, for us, we need to, as I said before, be better than just a good broker. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to stay in and around the same market share we have at the moment. We need to create a new voice, a new way to use a broker, a new experience for our customers. And in doing so, that's how we hope to win more and more market share. We have some very ambitious goals around our market share, and we can keep chipping away at that through just, as I said, being a better broker, or we can have a think about a new experience or design a new way to buy a property and have the broker at the center of that transaction. But if we do our job right, the mortgage is just the next thing that happens, because you're in there, you've got your conveyancing done, you're getting your contract reviews done, you've searched for your property using our property search, you've found your property, you may have an Aussie buyer's agent help you get there. Yeah. You are so embedded in that process and you are getting such a great experience from the technology that the mortgage is just the next thing that happens. And that's our job to deliver on that. That's the vision. We've made some great progress on that. Yeah, we've launched search, we've launched buyer's agents, we've launched conveyancing, and we're stitching all that together in the one cohesive experience. But we're still at the very beginning of realising this vision, beginning of that journey. We only launched this in sort of March at our conference, so very early days for us, but some really encouraging green shoots.
And it's important to note that you're not going into real estate. You're, you are. You're. I guess the buyer's agency side of things is it's a kind of a sort of a connecting area. But of course, buyer's agents work with sales agents and with leasing agents. So it's a complementary service. But let's just talk about that for a moment. Sure. And again, much the same as I've watched mortgage broking grow, flourish, provide a valuable service. I'm seeing, we've seen similar things happen in the buyer's agency area. It's taken a bit of a different trajectory because there's kind of lower barriers to entry, and it's sort of feeling a little bit like the Wild West in some ways, with this sort of real sort of attraction to come into being a buyer's agent. Yeah. So for a brand that is trusted, like Aussie has been for decades, there is, I see the opportunity to put a household name into that area. Tell me a little bit about how the buyer's agency proposition's going to work with the Aussie, the traditional Aussie proposition, and who will be operating in that particular sphere, and what will they be doing?
Yeah, so I mean, if we start at the beginning and just look at what buyers agents do, I think in Australia it's typically white collar, high ticket price, time poor executives that need help buying a property. That's typically how it's been framed to date. If you look at the US and Canada, you see something like 90% of houses are bought with a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Historically, it's been a different remuneration model over there. So it's a seller pays model. So that's the reason for such significant penetration. It was effectively the seller paying for the buyer agent. That has since changed, and it's now a buyer pays model, yet they're still seeing 85-90% buy side representation. In fact, if you talk to people in the industry, as we've done a lot of, as we've been starting to just understand this space and get the model right, they think it's just crazy that we buy our own properties down here. And if you think about it, they're kind of right. Like, we buy a property, every 7 years. Mm. So if you're a first home buyer, you've never bought a property before. And if you're a second home buyer, I don't know, maybe you're 40, 45 before you've bought your second property. And so we don't have a lot of practice in buying property. And certainly, there's a degree of common sense, but it's a large sales transaction. We have zero to minimal experience in at best. And as a consumer, we're going into the ring against experienced real estate agents.
This is it. And real estate is a very important, look, it's important to me. I'm a property investor. It's what sort of got me into this in the first place. But the real estate industry in Australia is unbelievably sophisticated. The quality and the approach and the methodology of sales agents, let alone the very best sales agents, is so good. And as you say, if you're buying a first property, maybe if you bought a couple of them,
sure,
you're up against an absolute professional. And they're good at, and by that I mean they're good at their job, and their job is to operate on behalf of the vendor.
Absolutely.
So having an agent that operates on my behalf, there's not many vendors that sell their own property, right? There's a few that have a go, and they do dismally badly generally. So the logic of choosing a professional to represent you in a negotiation makes absolute sense.
And anecdotally, you speak to a sell side real estate agent. We spend a lot of time talking to a lot of people in the real estate industry, and it makes for a cleaner transaction for both parties. It's not about one party sending in a hired gun for sale and out negotiating the next person. It's actually about having two experts sitting either side of the table. One's representing the buyer, one's representing the vendor, but they understand how the inputs to the transaction. They're there to talk commercially, unemotionally. There's thresholds that need to be met by both parties. And what you'll hear from a lot of the conversations I've had is I prefer to talk to a buyer's agent because we get in, we're talking the same language, we both representing either party, but we get the deal done, and we always find a fair middle ground that equally equally rewards both parties. And so if you accept that as being true, and then you accept that there's a lot of work that has to go into even finding the property. Like, the negotiation is the last mile.
Yeah.
Like, we're forgetting about the 6 months worth of home opens you got to go to and the research you got to do. And how do I interpret a flood zone versus a fire risk versus X, Y, Z? So, the negotiation's important, but it's actually getting you to find the right property within your budget. A lot of people miss out on a property because they've just got the wrong expectations around their budget and the market. They're going into home opens thinking it's got $1 million price tag on it, and their budget's $950, and they keep selling for 1.2, and they're wondering why they're in the market 12 months later. But also the market's jumped another 8% 12 months later, so the issue starts to compound. So a lot of the time what we're finding is actually just having a coach in their corner to go, hey, listen, you know what, this suburb for this budget isn't going to get you the 4 bedrooms that you want. We can look at a 2 or 3 bedroom, or let me have a talk to you about this suburb that meets all the same criteria. It's 2 over, whatever that might be, and you can get your 4 bedroom house in that area. And now let me go and do all the heavy lifting for you. So we're finding the proposition is resonating well. We're finding that it's being received well by the sell side agents that we're engaging with. We're still very early in our journey. We're still just coming out of our sort of testing phase. But we're taking a slightly different approach. We're going with a flat fixed fee.
Yep.
We're calling it a we'll do it with you model. So we like to say that we'll do everything except for fall in love with the house for you. That's your job. So we'll help you find the property. We'll do the research. We'll track down the right, areas. Give you all the insights I just touched on. But you'll need to go to the home open, touch it, feel it, tell us if you love it. And if you love it, we'll go and negotiate for you. And being able to deliver that at a fixed fee, a relatively attractive fixed fee, is making sure we're playing to Aussie's sort of, audience, which is, really that middle Australia. So
I've only used buyer's agents I bought properties. I've done okay by myself, but I've done a lot better using a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
And I used a buyer's agent just recently who is actually an ex-Aussie franchisee from he was in Parramatta, Ross Lacane, or no, for many years. And the reason I have the relationship is Ross was my mortgage broker for many, many years and good friend of mine. But anyway, we had an interesting experience, and I don't quite know what the answer is here, but using Ross and his team to negotiate. I bought in Victoria, which I'm very, very keen on at the moment. Bought in a suburb called Prahran, and I was sort of watching watching online, and I don't know whether this is good or bad, but I got the property $10,000 before I maxed out, right? And I don't know if I go, I'm happy about that, or would you sooner got it $10,000 above, your starting point? But the bottom line, I was very happy, and I thought that they'd priced, they got their positioning, sort of very well, and I'm a huge believer in using a buyer's agent, and wouldn't buy without one.
Oh, look, I've been in and around this industry for not as long as you have, but for 13 years. I bought a house this time last year, and I really wish I'd bought it. I used a buyer's agent. I wish I'd bought with a buyer's agent. Now that I know what I know, at the time I knew buyer's agents existed, but I'd probably had the same preconceived ideas as most people do, which is it's expensive. I don't really see the value. I can buy the property myself. And now that I actually understand the value that they bring, and the price tag that you can unlock that value at, I wish. I mean, I'm an easy person to sell to. I probably paid way over.
I'm hopeless. I'm a salesman. I'll buy anything.
Same. I'm the same. So I wish I'd had an expert in my corner telling me that I'm being crazy, but I didn't. And lesson learned. But next time I will for sure.
So I think there's many elements with the buyer's agent negotiating on your behalf, and I think and not the most important thing, but a detachment emotionally from what they're doing, but doing analysis and knowing where the band is in terms of where value lies, and understanding what the customer, if you've got a band, go, well, how far are you going to go? Are you comfortable with that? And if we don't succeed, then we move on and look at the next one.
Yeah.
And I think more and more and more buyers, whether I'm an investor, although I have bought my own home twice using a buyer's agent.
Yep.
But as an investor, I wouldn't consider buying without a buyer's agent. But I think more borrowers look at it, and home buyers and investors are now seeing that as being an essential part of their team, and not an additional thing.
It's definitely a growing market, and so for us, as I said, it forms an important part of our find, buy, and own proposition. It's definitely not in the must-have bucket, but it's in the could-have or should-have maybe bucket. Consumers are starting to understand the value. I touched on before, suburb growing 8 or 10% a year. If you're looking for a $700,000 property, $600,000 property, you're $60,000 a year in capital appreciation. Or said another way, it's costing you $5,000 every month you're not in that property. So if you're going to market with a $10,000 proposition, you're talking about 2 months worth of capital appreciation. Now, if you can get into that property sooner, with less hassle, or buy it at the right price, it arguably pays for itself. But I think for us, it's less about that, more about creating, as I said before, a different narrative, about giving our brokers a different conversation to have with their customers, about giving them access to different revenue streams. If you're a franchisee, a different reason to come into your store, and again, a different revenue stream, new business line. So it does serve a few different masters, but I think the early traction we've had is probably a really great proof point for the unmet demand that we're seeing at the moment. And we all know it's been, it's definitely been easier to buy a property in Australia. It's quite tricky at the moment, and we don't see those sort of supply and demand dynamics changing anytime soon. So look, we think it's the right brand with the right proposition at the right time for us. And look, proof will be in the pudding, but early signs are looking pretty good for us.
So Aussie is very much a human brand. And mortgage
Yeah.
broking is very much human interaction. And everything we've sort of talked about is, sort of very tangible. But you've got a very strong, underpinning with technology. And I'm not a tech guy, so I'm going to kind of muddle my way through.
Right.
So it'd be good to get some insights with very traditional. Aussie is a very well-known and very respected brand. You've got stores where people come in and have, personal interactions. Tell me about how technology underpins that. And tell me also, I'm sort of keen to know, Lendy came from that sort of tech perspective, but with a, with a new view of mortgage broking. How is technology going to change what you're doing, and how's it shaping what you're going to be doing moving forward?
Yeah, so I think probably I'll start with one of our values, which is keeping home loans human. I think that Aussie is a 33-year-old brand, as we touched on before. It's a very trusted brand, and it's got a network of very trusted brokers that have got decades of experience under their belt, and customers that they've got decades-long relationships with. But what we do know is that change is the only constant, to throw a one-liner at you. And what was an expectation around an experience 10 years ago will be different today and will be different again in 10 years. I mean, when we started this business, it was wet signatures, face-to-face only, physical ID, even just small innovations around the way that we ID people or the way that we engage with people. I mean, when we started this business, having a Zoom call would have been, it was probably a Skype back then, right? It wasn't really, people weren't comfortable with it. They weren't ready to transact.
Well, lenders certainly weren't happy about it.
Well, no, they definitely weren't. I mean, we spent the first couple of years going door to door and trying to convince lenders that wet signatures weren't here to stay, and we're told very matter-of-factly that they were.
Yeah.
But, we know the world changed pretty quickly when we were all forced to stay at home. I guess I say that's an obvious statement, but I say that because what we're building today may feel new and perhaps scary, but there'll be a point in time where it will be table stakes, and it will be a point in time when it will be the expectation. And so getting in front of that wave before it comes has always been important for us. You can react to something, or you can try and build for the future. So when that wave comes, you're ready to paddle onto it. And that's certainly the approach we've taken with AI. We don't look at it as nipping around the edges. And I think if you look at a lot of businesses and you ask them, what's your AI strategy, they'll talk to you about chatbots and, GPT to help write emails and, some of the sort of more obvious use cases like that. I think while that's fine, and we definitely are doing that, we see it as, and Dave, my business partner, sort of describes it as replacing what would typically be human motion with agentic motion. So if you think about what drives a business today, it's all human motion, whether that's revenue motion and working out how we're bringing new customers in and revenue in, through to operational motion, how we're settling this loan. And yeah, sure, there can be triaging of that work, and you've got just different humans doing different parts of that motion. For us, and the way we've been thinking about this is becoming AI native. So AI native will mean that AI exists completely through the stack, in the way that we run our business, in the way that we operate, and as I touched on before, in the way that we are driving different motions in the business. So to give you a practical example of that, when we have customers coming into our world today, there's a number of things that our humans will do, our brokers will do, that are largely administrative in nature. But I'll give you an example first. Conversation. Will be a lot of discovery. It'll be fact finding, to use an industry term. There'll be document collation. There will be product recommendation. What underpins that is the relationship, the engagement, and the desired outcome. Does that all need to be done by a human? If you've got the way to have a conversation agentically through an agentic funnel or experience or chat or whatever medium you decide, for that experience to be able to understand your needs, wants, desires, to be able to understand what documentation you need, to be able to make product recommendations, and then to have that superpowered by a human, that's a way that we create agentic motion in that specific example. That's the way that without a human having to decide to do something, we can start to pull customers through the funnel. We can start to give customers an experience that says, I will bring, you can decide when you want to chat to your broker, or the broker can decide when they feel they need to engage with you. But outside of that, it's not requiring a human to hit start on a process or pick up the phone or do whatever's next. The AI or the agent or the swarm of agents will understand what to do and how to do it and when. And so for us, that is about creating capacity, sure, but it's about creating like an infinite or elastic capacity within a whole range of different experiences. So if you're a broker, it means that you've got your customers have effectively 24/7 access to you or your knowledge base. If you're a customer, you can engage with your broker 24/7 as well. You can get relatively mundane things like file updates without having to sit on hold or call someone. You can get updates. You can search for features or products or apply for a new loan or whatever that may be with midnight if you want, without having to fill out a form and wait for a call back.
So here's the thing, the customer's changing, and customer expectations in the way they deal with all sorts of service providers is changing. But as you mentioned earlier, you buy a house occasionally, but you still expect, you don't know what so many buyers don't understand what a broker does, and why should they need to, right? But what they're looking for is a fluid experience to be kept informed, communicated throughout, and they don't know that the incredible work that the broker does. So having a fluid experience is important at a human level, at an outcomes level, and if the broker is the custodian of that experience, supported by agentic, support across what they're doing, that's good. Also, if you can reduce hours on file, because we all know that brokers aren't paid by the hour.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think that there is often, it can be, and I'm still a customer of, I buy property regularly, and I know my broker really well, and my broker works extremely hard, but it's can be quite a clunky experience, even with the best broker going, right? So I think smoothing that out is really important.
And it's also, we'll get used to a certain way of accessing information. We'll get used to a certain speed of response. We're impatient beings on a good day. And as we start to get accustomed to receiving information or doing research, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't really use Google for search anymore, or what I would used to use that for. It's all, GPT now. I had an experience the other day where I was on the phone with Telstra trying to get something sorted out, and it was call center to call center. And my inner monologue was, I wish I could just talk to a GPT, an agent, like an AI agent, sorry. Because they would know exactly what I was trying to do. They would know exactly everything about my file notes, without having to click around and open things up. I guarantee you there'll be a point in time where people will just say, well, why am I waiting on hold for this? Why do you have to go and speak to someone in the back hour or speak to your admin? Or why am I waiting for an email response? I just want to go, where is my file up to? And I want a response in 3 seconds, and I want it to be completely accurate and contextual to my question. And that is one very small example of AI. I think that if you extend that above, to how we're running the business, it's how we're building technology and the compression in cycle times and the ability to be, way more dynamic in how we engage customers and way more contextual. And if someone comes through, we should know exactly who they are, what they're looking to do, and how we can help serve them. But I guess all of this is to unlock capacity in our brokers' days and create better experiences for our customers. So while it's a great experience, I think that, the point I probably want to underscore there is that I bring us back to the keeping home loans human. I think certainly my view of the world is that customers will want a human there to help sense check those decisions along the way, given the size of the transaction. And ultimately, if we get our job right, then our brokers are spending more time finding new customers, building relationships, finding new partners, spending more time doing the stuff that they enjoy doing with their customers and less of the time on the stuff they don't. I mean, no one says, I wish I had more administration in my day, right?
Not many people.
No.
Might be the odd accountant. No, that's not fair on accountants. I think, looking at sort of the overall experience, it's in mortgages. It feels very outdated. Whether it's whether it's brokers waiting on lenders,
Yeah.
they spend a lot of time on hold themselves. So I think there's,
Yeah.
and we had Jack Campbell, who's the editor, caused a bit of a stir with some sort of suggestions around utilization of AI on the lender side, and there was and upset some BDMs and got some got some comments from the marketplace. But a lot of, I think there are efficiencies that can be gained throughout. But again, I come back to the customer. The customer's changing. The customer expects.
Yeah.
Why should they know about all the ins and outs of mortgage broking? Then they don't need to know about it. But they do have expectations around service, speed of service, communication, being kept informed. So I think that there's
Well, I think it just, humans aren't made redundant necessarily. They're just doing different things.
Yeah.
Again, like one thing that Dave, my business partner, likes to say is AI for speed and scale, humans for complexity and trust. And so it just means we're not doing the repetitive, tasks that we once did, or that we've got people in our business doing them. It means that we're doing the complex tasks or tasks that require trust. So if you're a BDM, maybe you're not answering all of those questions that you answer 100 times a day anymore. You're taking away the more complex solutions, and you're doing work that is, probably a little bit more interesting, if I'm being honest. And you're able to reduce your phone calls per day by X% and focus on doing bigger, high impact tasks or outcomes.
You increase productivity.
Yeah, spot on. Because, I don't know how many phone calls they get every day where they answer the same question. I'd imagine it's a lot. In a world where you don't have to do that, what are you doing with that capacity? Well, it's not like you're just going and sitting on a beach. You're just doing different things, and you're doing more complex things. And, you're probably doing things that require a little bit more brain power and are probably a little bit more interesting. So, it's not like there's nothing to be done still. You're just doing stuff that requires complexity or trust.
I think the world is starting to work out that AI isn't going to replace a lot of jobs. It's just going to change the way that a lot of jobs are done. And again, tech is not my strong point. But looking at the role of a broker, whether you're working with Aussie or whether you're working under your own brand, you've got the approval and all the segments involved with securing a loan and then going through that process. But you've also got a business to build, to grow, customers to connect with. So, having agentic support, it empowers you to do the human things and spend more time doing the human things. And I look at, in our paralleled, one of our other brands, real estate business, looking at the changes that are taking place in real estate. There's a huge amount of administration in various areas of real estate. So reducing that administration doesn't mean that they take half the week off.
Yeah.
They just spend more time doing more productive stuff with their customers and growing their business.
Absolutely. If you had whatever, if you can save an hour per file, you're doing 15 or 20 files a month, there's 20 hours a week back in your day, it's half a week. On a 40-hour week, I don't know many brokers that work 40-hour weeks, but let's just say you did for a second. You're not talking about, minutes, you're talking about hours or days worth of productivity back. And if you had that time back and you could focus that on different things, growing your business, finding more customers, revenue generating activities, you're going to be a much better business for it. And so, as I said, it's not about replacing people, it's about getting people focused on more complex tasks, more valuable tasks. So, I don't know, you might have a team of 10 admins. Do they become 10 brokers? And do you then spend more time finding more customers and more partners and more referrers, generating more business, however that may be? The answer is you could, and you probably should, but it's up to people what they do with that time. But ultimately, it's a capacity unlock, not necessarily a redundancy play.
We're going to have to round off fairly soon, but there's something I'm keen to talk about before we could talk all day. I just want to move back into the real estate arena. You've launched, a search engine, a listings portal.
Yep.
It's a big area to play, and there's some very, very, very dominant players there. That must have been a daunting. What was the rationale, behind moving into that? And I think it'd be good for for our people tuning in, for them to understand who the beneficiaries are of that. And then, what was your sort of like taking on some fairly substantial players there?
Well, I'll probably start. We didn't wake up one day and decide we wanted to go head to head with some of the portals. The idea started by what I touched on before, when we said, why are customers having to bounce in from us over to a portal, back into us, over to an agent? over to an insurer, over to a conveyancer. What about if we just had that sitting in the one ecosystem? It's going to be better for our customers, infinitely better for our brokers because it creates stickier customers. And so, okay, great. If we accept that that's a vision that we want to achieve, what do we need to do? Well, we're going to need search and property in there. Okay, great. How do we do that? Well, as you said, it's not an easy task. But then if you look at what we have, we've got the Aussie brand. It's trusted. We've got a real estate community that are really interested in what we're doing at the moment. And when we look at, how do we play together with that industry in a world that serves both of our respective, goals? Well, then, we need to be clear about what we're looking for in that partnership and what we're bringing to that partnership. And then equally, the real estate groups need to be able to, that want to work with us, articulate, well, what do they want from the relationship and what can they bring? And when you look at that, search is really an important part of that connective tissue. But we're not monetizing that. It's free for everyone. So we're not charging real estate agents. We're not charging customers. We really just want the listings and the eyeballs. And we have the luxury of being able to do that in a world where we don't have to monetize it. We've built a good mortgage business and we'll continue to do so. And we're not looking to make money out of listings. We're not a media business and we don't pretend to be and we don't want to be. What we want to do is create a new way for customers to find, buy and own property. And we want to create a new world where real estate agents can get buyer inquiries from good quality buyers. And a world where we can, we finance a large percentage of the country who are buying a house every month through the Aussie brand. And by definition, we also have a large number of the sellers that we represent. Now, at the moment, we can't help those sellers. And so when I talked earlier about, well, how do we give value back to the real estate community? Well, what we're looking for out of that is to get ultimately more mortgage business. What we can give you is more seller leads, more property management leads, more qualified buyers through search. And so when you look at actually what we can put into that marketplace or that ecosystem, and then what real estate agents can put into that marketplace or ecosystem, and then how we can both take from that, really we're both playing to our individual strengths, but together we're helping each other supercharge our business. And we're taking customers into an experience that we ultimately believe is a better experience. But in doing so means that, they're maybe not having to pay the full whack of a portal, or as a real estate agent.
Which is expensive. It's not a cheap proposition.
And look, it serves a purpose, and there's some great businesses that have been built in that space. But, doesn't have to be a one size fits all. There's an opportunity for people to come and test with a free listing first. And if we do our job right, we'll have, thousands of buyers looking to purchase those properties. And maybe there's a quicker, faster, cheaper way to list and sell your property. That's certainly the vision we're looking to unlock and the path that we're on. But, I guess we'll probably have to do this podcast again in 12 months and we can be assessed on our success rather than, the vision. But certainly what I would say is early days, we've had some really great response from the real estate groups.
Yeah.
We've got thousands of real estate agents that have already signed up. We have tens of thousands of direct listings from those agents already. And we're getting some really good early traction. So look, very early days, we're 2 or 3 months in really, if we're being honest with ourselves. But, we certainly have all the right ingredients and, we're just working out how to bake the cake at the moment.
Others have looked to go into that space, but they've gone from a different angle. They've seen a substantial business that REA and very, very effective as it's built. You've got Domain, heavyweight player, been there for a long, long time, longer, I believe, than REA.
Yeah.
And so you've got other players that have come in looking to generate the same revenue through a clear sort of portal play. You're coming in from a different angle. So if I'm an agent listing and I'm paying to go on, 1 or 2 of the other sites and I get an opportunity to list for free, with your site, then why wouldn't I?
Yeah, a lot of... not many people have gone mortgage into listings. There's been plenty that have gone listings and tried to monetize the mortgage. So we've started with the mortgage and we've gone the other way around. There's a few people, so Rocket in the US have a similar play where they started mortgage and they've gone into listings and they've had great success with it. It is different. As I said before, I guess the advantage we have is that we're not trying to monetize the listings business. we're trying to create a better experience for our mortgage customers. And in doing so, we're looking to create a fierce and hopefully very profitable alliance with the real estate groups around the country.
I think what you're doing is, it's true innovation and it's courageous. You're not standing still, but it's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
It's
still a lot to do.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your openness and your willingness to have a chat on this podcast. And like I say, an extension of the conversations we've had.
Yeah.
Sort of closed doors, but I'm very grateful for you coming along today and sharing it with Broker Daily.
Yeah, absolutely. To lean back on another one of our principles, we've got one called radical transparency. So, ideas are free. It really comes down to execution. So, we're happy to talk about it, but judge us on what we do, not what we're going to say, I guess. So we'll soon find out. But look, we're very excited about the path that we're on, and we're seeing some really positive early momentum. So we're just going to keep pushing forward.
Sebastian, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.